Ever feel like people operate on a completely different rule book than you do? Or maybe you look back at something you did and just shake your head, wondering what on earth was going on.
Oh, absolutely. We're constantly trying to make sense of, well, the human element, both in others and ourselves. And yeah, it can be baffling.
That feeling of being blindsided,
Yeah.
it really underscores a key point, doesn't it?
Hmm.
We often assume a level of rationality that just isn't always there.
Exactly. And that's really what we're diving into today. The underlying forces that drive human behavior, why we do the things we do.
Precisely. We've sifted through a fascinating array of observations about human nature, and our mission is pretty simple. Extract the core insights. Figure out why we all tick the way we do.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to understanding the hidden engines of our actions.
Yeah, because that confusion, that moment of why did they do that, or even why did I do that,
Mhm.
it's not just about dealing with difficult personalities.
No, it goes deeper. It's about understanding the fundamental wiring.
Right. It extends to those moments of personal regret, too, those impulsive decisions that seem to come out of nowhere.
And what's consistently highlighted in the material we looked at is the enduring power of our evolutionary past. It's still running the show in many ways.
Like our need for belonging, our sensitivity to the group.
Mm-hmm. And the ingrained awareness of social pecking orders, even our tribal instincts, these ancient drivers, are still powerfully shaping how we interact today.
Don't forget the different faces we show the world.
Ah, the masks we wear. Yeah, it's like we're all putting on a performance to some extent.
And understanding that, understanding why we and others might present a certain image, well, that's crucial.
It's not about judging it, is it? More about recognizing it as part of the human landscape.
Exactly. And the good news, or what our sources suggest anyway, is that by getting a handle on these deep-seated forces, we can actually gain more control.
Both over ourselves and how we navigate our social lives. More mastery, maybe.
Instead of just reacting, we can start to anticipate.
Right. Instead of feeling like we're at the mercy of our impulses or, other people's whims, we can begin to see the patterns.
Which allows for more conscious choices, more effective interactions.
Precisely. Which brings us to a common sticking point. When we encounter resistance, our first instinct is often to push harder, right? To argue or persuade directly.
Yeah, try to force the issue.
But our material hints at a more nuanced approach, one that's less about force and more about, well,
Lowering resistance.
lowering those defenses, exactly. People naturally resist feeling like their minds are being changed. You push, they push back harder.
So trying to convince them directly can actually backfire.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It can strengthen their initial stance. The key seems to be understanding their underlying insecurities and what truly motivates them, their self-interest.
Okay, so acknowledge their perspective, their self-worth first.
And then they become much more open to what you have to say. It's about understanding, not just arguing.
Okay, let's unpack this further, starting with something that really jumped out at me. This whole illusion of rationality.
Ah, yes.
Pericles, the famous Athenian leader, he had some fascinating insights on this, didn't he? He saw these politicians who thought they were being so strategic and logical.
Absolutely. Pericles observed that these Athenian politicians, they firmly believed they were acting with clear, rational objectives. Power, influence, wealth. They had their strategies all laid out.
Sounds reasonable on the surface.
But their collective actions repeatedly plunged Athens into turmoil, self-destruction even. Pericles concluded it wasn't logic driving their decisions at all.
It was their emotions.
Their underlying emotions, yes. Their hunger for power, for attention, for money, that was overriding their supposed rationality. It's a powerful reminder. We consistently rationalize emotional decisions as logical strategy.
So everyone thinks they're playing chess, but really it's more like emotional checkers,
Yeah.
and they're just making up the rules as they go.
That's a pretty sharp way of putting it, yeah. And this goes beyond just everyday self-interest getting in the way. Our sources also delved into what they term high-grade irrationality. This is different. This is when emotions really intensify.
Like extreme anger, blinding excitement.
Or deep resentment, consuming suspicion. In these heightened states, our ability to perceive things clearly just gets warped. Everything is filtered through that intense emotional lens.
Sounds like a runaway train of feeling. Hard to stop.
Exactly. Impatience can quickly spiral into rage. Resentment can fester into paranoia. This level of irrationality fuels extreme behaviors, violence, obsession, unchecked greed, the drive to dominate.
So recognizing when we're entering that reactive zone, That's critical.
It could be. It offers a chance to pause before we act in ways we'll later regret, like an early warning system for our own emotional
A
hijackings.
little alarm bell before we say or do something we can't take back.
Got it.
Now, the sources also discussed conviction bias. That sounds familiar, especially today, online, everywhere.
Oh, definitely. Conviction bias is our inherent tendency to believe that ideas presented with strong conviction must be true.
So if someone sounds really sure of themselves,
If they speak with unwavering certainty, using dramatic language, big gestures, we're inclined to assume they've thoroughly vetted their claims. They sound like they know what they're talking about.
and conversely, someone who expresses nuance or hesitation.
They might be perceived as less credible, even dishonest sometimes. It's a warning. Beware of conviction as a proxy for truth. Passionate delivery doesn't guarantee validity.
So the more someone pounds the table and insists they're right, the more likely we are to believe them, even if their argument is, well, full of holes.
That's the danger, yes. This bias makes us really susceptible to manipulation. Think about salespeople, demagogues. They often use conviction as a powerful tool.
Clicking flimsy arguments in dramatic flair.
Exactly. People are naturally drawn to entertainment, and conviction can be very entertaining. It's a good reminder to be skeptical of absolute certainty and theatrical pronouncements.
Definitely something to keep in mind in a world full of strong opinions. Okay, what about when the pressure cooker is on? Our sources mention that rising pressure can reveal a lot about someone's true character.
Absolutely. People generally present a carefully constructed social facade, right? A version of themselves they want others to see.
Sure, we all do to some extent.
But when subjected to significant stress or threat, that mask can easily slip. The more primitive parts of our brain, the survival instincts, they become dominant.
Overriding reason and self-control.
Often, yes. Stress acts like a litmus test. It exposes underlying flaws, maybe insecurities or tendencies that were previously hidden. Observing how individuals behave when the stakes are high is a really valuable indicator of their true nature.
So when the chips are down, pay less attention to what people say they'll do and more to how they actually behave in the moment.
That sounds like the real truth serum, doesn't it?
It does. And finally, in this section, the idea of balancing skepticism and curiosity was raised. That feels like walking a tightrope sometimes.
It is a delicate balance, but it's a vital one. Think of it as having both a detective's critical eye, that's skepticism, and an explorer's open-mind curiosity.
Okay, so you need both.
You need to be skeptical of your own biases, first off, and also the claims of others. Don't just accept information at face value. Look at the actual outcomes of actions, not just what people say their intentions were.
But don't become too skeptical.
Right, because then you risk shutting yourself off to new ideas, exciting possibilities. You become cynical.
So question everything, but stay open to the possibility that you might be wrong, or that there's something new and valuable to learn.
Precisely. Hold on to that inherent human curiosity, that interest in the world, while simultaneously cultivating the ability to critically examine and verify information for yourself. The two aren't mutually exclusive, they actually enhance each other.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the law of narcissism and empathy. The title itself suggests a bit of a tug-of-war.
It does, doesn't it? This law basically highlights that while empathy, that crucial ability to connect with others, understand their perspectives, it's within us, but it's often overshadowed by our natural inclination towards self-absorption. Let's face it, we are all, to varying degrees, narcissistic. It's baked in.
So the challenge is
To become aware of this inherent self-focus and consciously direct our sensitivity outwards, towards understanding the needs and feelings of others.
So it's not about becoming a selfless saint overnight, but about consciously expanding our circle of concern beyond just ourselves.
Exactly. And a key part of this is also learning to recognize and navigate those with, let's say, toxic levels of narcissism.
Before we get tangled up in their games.
Right. Before we become entangled in their manipulative patterns or affected by their potential envy, that's crucial for self-protection.
That sounds like an essential skill. Our sources gave that compelling example of Shackleton, his leadership during that incredible Antarctic expedition. Empathy was key there.
Yes, Shackleton was remarkably attuned to the emotional states of his men during that incredibly difficult journey. Just imagine.
Unbelievable conditions.
He made a deliberate effort to connect with each individual. He'd engage them in conversations about their interests, paid close attention to their problems, big and small, and addressed them proactively.
So no one felt forgotten or resentful.
Exactly. His deep empathy was absolutely crucial in maintaining morale and, ultimately, ensuring their survival under the most extreme circumstances imaginable.
It's a powerful demonstration of how understanding individual needs can be a real game changer, especially in high-stress situations. Now, the discussion also brought up the idea of acting in social situations.
Yeah.
That might sound insincere at first.
Mm-mm. But the way it was framed, it's presented as a fundamental social skill, almost a necessity, really.
We all do it.
We all adopt different roles and adjust our behavior depending on the social context. Think about it. You act differently with your boss than with your friends or a customer.
Right, you code switch.
Constantly, adjusting our tone, our language, our mannerisms to fit the situation and the people we're with.
It's like we're all playing different characters depending on the scene.
Precisely. Imagine someone who completely lacks this ability, whose face always shows exactly what they're thinking, unfiltered,
Who always speaks their mind without considering the consequences.
who acts the same way in every single setting. Such a person would likely face significant social challenges, wouldn't they?
Definitely.
The truth is, we're all such accomplished social actors that we often don't even realize we're doing it. We believe we're being authentic.
Which, ironically, is key to being a believable social actor.
Often, yes. It's a subtle dance we're all constantly performing.
But beyond these more obvious social performances, our sources also highlighted watching for nonverbal cues. What are some key signals we should be paying attention to?
Oh, there are loads. Subtle signals that can betray underlying feelings. Things like fleeting expressions of displeasure, a micro-expression gone in a flash,
Like a quick frown.
or quickly concealed eye roll after you've said something. These can reveal negative thoughts the person is trying to hide. When you approach someone who harbors negative feelings towards you, that momentary flash of genuine emotion before their social mask snaps into place, that can be very telling.
So those split-second, almost unconscious reactions can be the most honest indicators.
Often, yes. And when it comes to gauging comfort and connection, look for clusters of cues. Things like physical proximity, how close do they stand?
Okay.
An open and relaxed posture, frequent head nods during conversation, and mirroring when someone unconsciously adopts your posture or gestures.
Like if I lean forward, they lean forward.
Exactly. And the ultimate sign of deep rapport is synchrony, when the other person subtly mirrors your movements, even your breathing patterns, without either of you being aware of it. Have you ever noticed when you're getting along really well with someone, you might both cross your legs at the same time without even thinking about it?
Huh. Yeah, I think I have. That's synchrony.
Oh,
Fascinating. It's like an unspoken harmony.
it really is.
The sources also touched on some more subtle, almost manipulative nonverbal power plays, like using illness.
Yes, this is a subtle but sometimes effective way people gain control in a relationship. One partner might frequently develop minor ailments or exhibit negative behaviors.
Complaining a lot.
Yeah. And it subtly forces the other person to take on a caregiver role, to adjust their own needs and plans accordingly. It's a way of manipulating sympathy to gain the upper hand.
It's a bit like weaponizing vulnerability. And finally, in this section, the advice was to use these nonverbal cues to assess confidence levels. How does that help us?
Well, by observing nonverbal cues, you can often detect a leader's underlying insecurities, even if they project this air of total confidence.
Even if they talked a big game.
Right. Now, you could potentially exploit these insecurities, but maybe a more prudent approach is often just to exercise caution around such individuals. Their instability can create problems down the line.
Makes sense.
Conversely, being able to distinguish between genuine self-assurance and just, arrogance, that can help you make better decisions about who to trust, who to align with. Look for genuine positive energy, a clear sense of purpose, not just empty bravado or forced displays of dominance.
Okay, that's really useful. Let's move into the power of character and self-awareness. This feels like we're really getting down to the core of who we are.
We are indeed. The sources define character as those deeply ingrained patterns of behavior that operate largely outside of our conscious control. It's almost automatic.
And the word itself, character.
Yeah, the origin, from ancient Greek, refers to an engraving tool, or the mark it makes. It highlights how deeply these patterns are etched within us, like grooves.
So it's not just about our deliberate choices, but these automatic tendencies that shape how we respond.
Exactly. And our sources outline several distinct character types. First, there's what they call the resentful type.
Okay, what defines them?
This is someone who consistently perceives themselves as having been wronged. They hold on to grievances, often for years and years,
Always the victim.
in their own narrative, yes. And the advice regarding this type is pretty straightforward. If possible, avoid them. They tend to see the negative in every situation and can be incredibly emotionally draining.
They sound like they carry a permanent rain cloud over their heads. What about the drama magnet?
Ugh, the drama magnet. This is an individual who seems to unconsciously attract, or maybe even create, conflict and chaos wherever they go.
We all know someone like that.
Probably. Often, this pattern originates in childhood. They might have learned that the only way to get consistent parental attention was through crises and problems, so the pattern becomes deeply ingrained.
And they often position themselves as the victim in their frequent interpersonal battles.
Usually, yes. It brings the attention back to them. It can be so exhausting to be around.
They're the ones who always seem to have a new crisis unfolding.
Sure.
Okay, and then there's the rigid moralist.
Right. The rigid moralist is characterized by their fervent, often very public condemnation of certain behaviors or very judgmental. But secretly, they often harbor a strong desire for those very things they condemn. They typically lack genuine empathy, and eventually, they're likely to turn that judgmental gaze onto you.
It's like they're overcompensating for their own internal conflicts by loudly criticizing others, trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else.
That's a good way to put it. Now, a key takeaway here seems to be that character is formed early in life and has this powerful tendency to repeat itself.
Why is that?
Well, neurobiologically, our brains are wired to reinforce established patterns. Once we think or act in a particular way, neural pathways are strengthened. It makes it easier, more automatic to repeat that thought or action in the future.
Like carving a path in the brain.
Exactly. And this neurological reinforcement is why breaking ingrained habits, changing character patterns, can be so incredibly challenging.
So those early experiences really do lay down the tracks for a lot of our later behavior.
Eh.
But it's not all negative, right? Our sources also described a more constructive character orientation.
Yes, thankfully. The expansive attitude is presented as a much more beneficial and fulfilling way of being.
What does that look like?
It's characterized by a genuine curiosity about the world, a continuous drive for learning and growth, generosity towards others, tolerance for different perspectives, a willingness to engage in honest self-reflection. And this is key, including acknowledging one's own role in failures, plus adaptability in the face of change, and an acceptance of life's inherent uncertainty.
That sounds like a much more enjoyable and frankly productive way to navigate the world than being constantly resentful or creating drama.
Definitely.
So just to contrast, what are the defining traits of the opposite, the resentful attitude?
The resentful attitude is marked by that tendency to hold on to past hurts and grievances, a consistent habit of blaming others for misfortunes, a deep-seated dread of change and the unknown, and a generally defensive posture when challenged.
It's a very closed-off approach.
Closed and often bitter, yes. It sounds emotionally exhausting just contemplating it.
It really does. Okay, let's delve into the shadow side of human nature. This feels like we're exploring the aspects of ourselves and others that we often prefer to ignore or hide.
We are. The shadow, in this context, refers to those negative or less desirable aspects of our personality that we tend to bury or repress.
Why do we repress them?
Often because they're deemed socially unacceptable, or maybe because we ourselves find them uncomfortable or shameful. But these aspects don't just disappear. They can emerge under stress or when our insecurities get triggered.
So we usually only see the surface.
Often, yes. We only see the carefully curated social persona people present a polished sort of two-dimensional image. Understanding their shadow provides a more complete three-dimensional picture of who they truly are. Everyone possesses a shadow of repressed traits. Recognizing its potential influence is key.
Both in ourselves and in others' seemingly inexplicable behaviors.
Exactly. It helps make sense of things sometimes.
So it's about acknowledging that everyone, even those who seem outwardly perfect, has a darker side to their personality, something hidden.
Precisely. And our sources suggest that sometimes, ironically, exaggerated positive traits can actually be a sign of the shadow at work.
How so?
For instance, someone who is excessively concerned with appearing virtuous, always doing the right thing, might be overcompensating, repressing less noble impulses.
That definitely makes you reconsider those who are almost too good to be true. What are some other clues that might indicate the presence of someone's shadow?
Be cautious of individuals who display overly strong convictions. We talked about conviction bias, and engage in really dramatic emotional displays. Often, these are masking deep-seated insecurities and inner doubts.
Okay. Any other types?
Also, consider the rigid rationalist. This is someone who is intensely uncomfortable with any form of irrationality, emotions, intuition, ambiguity. They resort to extreme analytical thinking in every single situation.
It's like they're trying to intellectualize their way out of feeling anything messy.
It can sometimes be a way of suppressing their own underlying beliefs or powerful emotions that they fear, a defense
And
mechanism.
we've touched on this before, but pressure really has a way of revealing those hidden aspects of the shadow, doesn't it? Like a spotlight.
Absolutely. Stressful situations can strip away that carefully constructed veneer of control and reveal concealed flaws in character. The anecdote about Mary Shelley's anxieties while staying with Shelley and Edward illustrates this.
She had a bad feeling.
She had this persistent feeling of unease, a premonition of underlying danger, even regarding the seemingly innocuous boat they were building, a feeling that, tragically, turned out to be accurate.
Wow. It's like she was subconsciously picking up on something dangerous that others were either unaware of or choosing to ignore.
Possibly her intuition, her shadow perception, was heightened. Now, our sources also mentioned envy bites. That sounds particularly nasty.
It does. What are they?
They are subtle, often seemingly innocent comments, sometimes even framed as compliments, but they're designed to undermine and sow seeds of doubt. Poisonous praise is a classic example.
Should you give an example?
Sure. Praising someone's financial success from a project while subtly implying that, monetary gain was their only motivation, it diminishes the value of their actual skills, their effort, their creativity.
It's a backhanded compliment with a hidden barb. Ouch. How do people who are prone to envy typically deal with those feelings internally? Do they know they're envious?
Often unconsciously, they develop ingrained coping mechanisms. This might involve consistently denigrating anything good in the world, finding fault with everything,
The eternal critic.
or becoming fiercely independent to avoid situations that might trigger their envy, or even engaging in self-devaluation, putting themselves down to preempt the pain of comparison.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And these strategies are often fragile. They can break down under pressure, leading to those envy bites directed at others when the repressed feelings surface.
It sounds like a very difficult emotional state to manage. What about the self-entitled slacker? That feels like a distinctly modern type we hear about.
Yes, the self-entitled slacker is often described as a product of excessive pampering and maybe a lack of clear boundaries in childhood.
So they grow up expecting.
Constant admiration. They develop an inflated sense of their own importance, often without having achieved much to warrant it. If they do possess some talent, this inflated self-belief can sometimes become a self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree.
But unlike others, they rarely experience feelings of inadequacy or the need to work really hard.
That's the typical profile, yes. They've essentially skipped the part where you learn to deal with challenges, limitations, and, frankly, hard graft.
Now, the discussion also touched on how the decline of traditional institutions like religion has influenced grandiosity. How does that work?
Well, the idea is that with the waning influence of traditional religion and grand societal causes in many parts of the world, that fundamental human need to feel significant, to be part of something bigger, it doesn't just vanish.
It has to go somewhere.
Exactly. People often redirect this grandiose energy inwards, towards their own ego. It can lead to a form of self-idealization that often operates unconsciously.
So we're seeing more individualized expressions of that desire for greatness, maybe disconnected from actual achievement sometimes.
That's one interpretation. And what are some of the common illusions that these grandiose individuals tend to create around themselves?
Several patterns emerge. One is constructing a destined narrative. They try to portray their life story as preordained for exceptional achievement, selectively remembering things, reinterpreting failures.
Precisely. Shaping the past to fit this myth of destiny. Another is the performance of feigned commonality.
What's that?
They might publicly embrace cultural tastes, music, sports, whatever, that resonate with the general population to create a sense of shared identity, despite significant differences in wealth or status. I'm just like you.
But the emphasis is on cultural alignment, not acknowledging actual class or status differences.
Often, yes. It's like saying, I'm just like you, except, much more special.
Right. How can we counteract this kind of unrealistic grandiosity, both in ourselves, because we all have a touch of it, and when we see it in others?
The key seems to be focusing your energy on tangible, achievable goals. Fantastical grandiosity often leads to a scattered approach, jumping between unrealistic ideas, accomplishing nothing concrete.
So get grounded.
Yes. Instead, commit deeply to a single project, maybe, with clear short-term objectives. Break it down into manageable steps. Strive for that state of flow where you become completely absorbed in the task at hand.
That provides a realistic counterpoint to the fantasies.
Exactly. It anchors you in real-world accomplishment.
That makes perfect sense. Let's move on to the importance of inner balance and purpose. This sounds like we're shifting towards a more holistic understanding of ourselves.
We are. This principle emphasizes reconnecting with and integrating the repressed aspects of ourselves, often framed as masculine and feminine qualities, regardless of gender, to achieve greater fluidity and authenticity.
Why do we repress these qualities?
Societal gender roles often pressure us to suppress valuable aspects of our personality simply because they don't fit neatly into traditional definitions of masculinity or femininity. And this can lead to a certain rigidity in our thinking and behavior.
It's like we're only using a fraction of our potential when we rigidly adhere to these external expectations. The example of Katerina Sforza, embodying both traditionally masculine strength and traditionally feminine grace, was particularly striking.
Yes, she was a fascinating figure, a powerful and influential woman who really defied the conventional gender expectations of her time. Her father was a fierce warrior, but also had a deep appreciation for the arts, wasn't afraid to show emotion.
And she inherited both sides.
She inherited and embraced both these sets of traits, making her a multidimensional and formidable individual. It highlights the richness we gain by embracing the full spectrum of human qualities, not just the ones prescribed for our gender.
It really underscores how much we limit ourselves when we buy into those rigid boxes. Our sources also mention something called a crisis of identity in relation to this.
Right. As children, our sense of self is usually quite fluid, unconstrained. We absorb energy, emotions, traits from all around us.
But then adolescence hits.
Exactly. During youth, we face pressure to construct a more cohesive social identity to fit in. This often involves repressing certain masculine or feminine traits to present a more consistent gender presentation.
This tightening around prescribed gender roles.
It can lead to a feeling of something lost, something unfulfilled, a sense of fragmentation, perhaps.
It's like we're pruning parts of ourselves to fit into a predetermined shape. What role does having a strong sense of purpose play in navigating all of this?
A strong sense of purpose can be profoundly transformative. Martin Luther King Jr.'s experience was mentioned navigating intense inner conflict, which ultimately led him to a deep sense of purpose and what he described as an inner voice.
How does purpose help?
When we connect with a deeply felt purpose, negative emotions, anxieties, resentments tend to lose their power. We gain remarkable focus, momentum, creativity. We become less susceptible to distractions, more fully engaged.
It acts as a compass,
Yeah,
guiding us through challenges.
precisely. It points you in a consistent direction, even when things get stormy. And our sources emphasize the importance of cultivating your own uniqueness in finding this purpose.
Not just following the crowd.
Absolutely. In a world where many people can seem increasingly interchangeable, your unique combination of skills, experiences, perspectives, that's what makes you irreplaceable. Embracing and developing that uniqueness is a true source of inner freedom and power.
So how do we actually go about developing this strong sense of purpose in our own lives? Where do we start?
Well, there are several paths suggested. Firstly, actively seeking out a calling, something that deeply resonates with your values, your interests, your natural inclinations.
Listening to that inner pull.
Yes. Secondly, seeking guidance and mentorship. Learning from those who have already found their purpose or walked a similar path. Like Coco Chanel found guidance in her relationship with Boy Capel.
Finding role models or mentors.
And crucially, learning to distinguish between genuine intrinsic purposes, things that come from within, and false externally driven ones.
What are some of those common false purposes that can lead us astray?
Things like the relentless pursuit of easy pleasure, just seeking comfort and fun all the time. Or the sole focus on material success and wealth accumulation as the ultimate goal.
Keeping up with the Joneses?
Or the constant seeking of social approval, needing everyone to like you. While these might offer temporary satisfaction, they often lead to a deeper sense of alienation and eventually a feeling of emptiness.
Like chasing mirages in the desert. They look appealing, but offer no real sustenance.
That's a great analogy. Individuals who prioritize these exclusively might become workaholics without true passion or find their gains are fleeting and insecure.
And finally, in this section, the concept of hyperintention was introduced. That sounds a bit paradoxical.
It is. Hyperintention describes the phenomenon where desperately trying to achieve a specific goal can actually hinder its attainment. The harder you try, the worse it gets sometimes.
Like trying too hard to fall asleep.
That's the classic example. Your anxiety about not sleeping keeps you awake. Similarly, if we obsess about delivering a flawless presentation, our nervousness can sabotage our performance.
So the harder you grasp for it, the more it slips away.
Often, yes. The most enjoyable and fulfilling things in life often arise as a byproduct of being fully engaged in something else rather than directly aiming for them.
So sometimes the best way to achieve something is to relax our grip a bit. Focus on the process, not just the outcome.
That seems to be the idea. Let go of the desperate striving.
Okay, let's move into our final major section, navigating social hierarchies and influence. This feels like we're getting into the practicalities of interacting effectively with others, especially in groups or organizations.
We are. This is about understanding the power dynamics. Our sources describe various tactics used by those seeking influence within social hierarchies. Think of the historical idea of the courtier.
What kind of tactics?
Things like carefully tailored flattery, not generic compliments, but praise that specifically addresses the leader's known insecurities, and subtly mirroring their ideas and values.
Making the leader feel validated and understood, like you're on the same wavelength.
Exactly. It's a delicate art. It's all about making them feel good about themselves and their own thoughts, reinforcing their self-image.
What about the group enemy dynamic? That seems like a potent, though potentially dangerous tool for building influence or group cohesion.
It is indeed potent. Our evolutionary history has predisposed us to bond strongly when faced with a perceived common threat, whether it's real or imagined.
The us versus them mentality.
It can rapidly solidify group cohesion, as Anton Chekhov apparently observed. Love, friendship, respect do not unite people as much as a common hatred for something.
Wow, that's a stark reminder of how easily we can be united by what we're against. Now, the sources also cautioned against simply imitating jesters, those figures who rebel against established norms. Why is that risky?
Well, while the nonconformity of a jester might seem appealing, maybe even cool, there's usually only room for one such figure within a given social group. They occupy a unique space.
So trying to copy them.
Attempting to imitate their rebellious behavior without possessing their specific social capital or established position can easily backfire. You just look like a troublemaker or someone trying too hard.
So subtlety and timing are key.
Generally, yes. It's often wiser to reserve overt nonconformity for your private life, or at least until you've accumulated more influence and respect within the group. Pick your moments carefully.
Got it. Don't be the second jester. What about the mirrors? They sounded like more consistently successful navigators of these social dynamics.
Yes, mirrors are described as being skilled at reflecting back to people their own moods and ideas. They make others feel deeply understood and validated, often without the other person perceiving any manipulation.
How does that work? Why is it so effective?
Their power lies in that fundamental human tendency towards narcissism we talked about earlier. We all appreciate seeing ourselves reflected positively. By making others feel understood on their own terms, mirrors build broad support and influence.
It's a subtle form of flattery, focusing on their internal state rather than just outward compliments.
And it can be very effective, yes. The discussion also touched on the importance of instilling a collective purpose within a group. How can leaders do that effectively? What's the key?
Primarily by embodying the ideals themselves and constantly reinforcing the group's core mission. A leader's actions must align with their words, walks the talk.
Absolutely. Any hypocrisy will quickly undermine their efforts. Leaders need to regularly remind the group of its fundamental purpose, adapting how they talk about it as needed, but never straying from its core tenets.
Making people feel part of something larger.
Yes, making individuals feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves, something genuinely important, satisfies a deep human need for meaning. This can foster high levels of motivation and even self-regulation within the group.
It's about creating that shared vision that transcends individual egos and inspires collective action. Our sources used Queen Elizabeth I as an example of someone who navigated a period of great uncertainty to build trust and authority. What can we learn from her approach?
Initially, Elizabeth was largely an unknown entity when she took the throne. There was a lot of doubt. She strategically used this to her advantage by revealing little and allowing people to project their own hopes and fears onto her.
Playing it close to the vest.
In the beginning, yes. But over time, she built unwavering trust by consistently prioritizing the well-being of the country over her personal feelings or ambitions. She even acknowledged mistakes when necessary, which builds credibility.
And in dealing with rivals.
In her dealings with foreign rivals, she was shrewd and decisive. She understood that respect on the international stage had to be earned through a combination of strength, diplomacy, and strategic action, not just words.
It was a gradual but deliberate process of building confidence and projecting an image of strong, reliable leadership. On a more personal level, how can we cultivate our own authority in our interactions day to day?
One piece of advice is to regularly reflect on the impact you actually have on others. Ask yourself, are you consistently met with resistance? Do people tend to disregard your advice or requests? Why might that be?
Be self-aware about your influence, or lack thereof.
And crucially, avoid overpromising. Always ensure you deliver on your commitments. Failing to follow through erodes trust faster than almost anything, and consequently, it destroys your authority.
Under-promise and over-deliver. Seems like a solid strategy for building credibility over time.
It generally is. The discussion then shifted to aggression, making a distinction between primitive and sophisticated aggressors. What's the key difference there?
Primitive aggressors tend to be easily provoked, lack self-control. They often sabotage their own goals through impulsive actions, outbursts of anger, things like that. They wear their aggression on their sleeve.
Pretty much. Sophisticated aggressors, in contrast, are adept at masking their intentions. They present a disarming facade, seem reasonable, even friendly.
But underneath,
They subtly exploit the docility or weaknesses of others. They often rise to positions of power by skillfully avoiding direct confrontation and strategically wearing down their opponents over time. Patience and subtlety are their weapons.
so the most effective aggressors are often the ones whose aggression is least obvious? That's a bit scary.
It can be. The sources also pointed out how aggression can manifest in unconscious ways, not just overt attacks.
How so?
It can appear in subtle attempts to control or manipulate others, sometimes even disguised as helpful advice or well-intentioned guidance that subtly undermines someone or puts them in their place.
Passive aggression. Or something else.
It can be passive aggression, but also just this underlying competitive drive. We might not consciously recognize it as aggression, but it often stems from an underlying comparison, comparing our own perceived strength or competence with that of others and wanting to come out on top.
It's a reminder to be constantly aware of our own underlying motivations in our interactions.
Yeah.
Why am I saying this? And despite its prevalence, our society often seems hesitant to openly acknowledge aggression.
Yeah, there's a significant disconnect, isn't there, between our everyday experiences and our conscious self-perception. We see aggression in various forms all around us: workplace politics, social media battles, news, entertainment.
But we rarely admit to being aggressive ourselves.
Exactly. We see ourselves as reasonable, provoked perhaps, but not inherently aggressive. This internal conflict, along with the fear of confronting aggression in others, can even stifle our creativity.
How does it stifle creativity?
Because the creative process often involves a degree of assertive exploration, challenging existing norms, pushing boundaries. If you're afraid of that assertive energy, afraid of aggression in yourself or others, it can hold you back.
So we need to reframe our understanding of aggression, not see it as purely negative.
Absolutely. The suggestion is that aggression is a natural human energy. Rather than being simply repressed or denied, it needs to be understood, channeled, and directed productively towards our goals.
Taming it, not eliminating it.
Recognizing it as a neutral force, like fire, it can be destructive or it can be harnessed rationally for warmth and power.
Finally, in this section, Danton, during the French Revolution, was cited as an example, someone who grasped and acted decisively on a moment of significant change. What made him so effective in that chaotic context?
Danton possessed the vision, apparently, to recognize the inevitable downfall of the monarchy when many others were still hesitant, in denial, or hoping for compromise. He saw where things were heading.
And he didn't just see it, he acted.
He articulated this vision clearly and powerfully, effectively rallying widespread support, particularly among the common people. He had a keen understanding of the shifting power dynamics and acted decisively, with conviction, to bring about the change he foresaw.
Timing and decisiveness were key.
His ability to make sense of a chaotic situation and to act boldly at the critical moment was crucial to his influence. He seized the moment.
Okay, we've reached our final main topic. Understanding generational dynamics and the passage of time. This feels particularly relevant right now, as the world seems to be changing faster than ever.
It is very relevant. Our sources explain the cyclical nature of generational conflict. Younger generations often define themselves, at least partly, by reacting against the established values and norms of their predecessors.
Pushing back against the old ways.
It's a recurring pattern throughout history. Each cohort feels the need to differentiate itself.
And our sources suggested that these generational perspectives, formed during youth, tend towards a more black and white view of the world, less nuance.
Precisely. When you're young and forming your identity, a nuanced perspective that acknowledges both the good and the bad aspects of the previous generation's values often seems, well, weak or compromising. It feels more urgent to draw clear lines.
But this constant back and forth,
This tension between generations, while sometimes uncomfortable, actually serves a vital purpose. It prevents societal stagnation. It forces reevaluation and fosters progress, even if it feels messy.
so it's a necessary part of societal evolution, even if it can feel a bit contentious at times. How can we navigate these generational divides more effectively then, both looking back and looking forward?
The advice is to consciously adopt the perspective of an archaeologist. Examine your own past, your own generation's assumptions, and the perspectives of other generations with a sense of detachment, without immediate judgment.
Like studying artifacts,
Yeah.
trying to understand their context.
Exactly. Catch yourself making simplistic good versus bad assessments based purely on generational differences and actively challenge those assumptions. Ask why they thought or acted that way.
And with practice,
With practice, you can develop a more objective understanding. This allows you to move beyond simply being a product of your generation or just a knee-jerk rebel against it, and potentially become a more genuine trendsetter or bridge builder.
it's about taking a step back and seeing the broader historical context, the bigger picture. The discussion also touched on how life stages and the historical periods we live through shape us in ways that are often beyond our individual control.
Yes, and that can be unsettling. We all progress through different phases of life: childhood, youth, adulthood, old age. And we're born into specific historical contexts, specific generational cohorts that profoundly influence us, often in ways we don't consciously choose or even recognize.
Which can lead to feelings of helplessness, anxiety about time passing.
It can, yes. A sense that we're just being carried along by forces larger than ourselves, a humbling reminder of our place within a larger flow of history.
Our sources offered the concept of seeking immortality, not literally, of course, but as a way to transcend these temporal limitations. How did that idea play out?
By consciously connecting with future generations, recognizing the cyclical nature of history and the potential for our work, our ideas, our values, maybe even just our influence on others, to resonate beyond the span of our own lifetime.
That gives a sense of continuity.
It can provide a profound sense of continuity and purpose that transcends our individual mortality. We become a link in a chain, a part of a larger, ongoing story.
It's about leaving a legacy, contributing something that outlasts our own existence. The anecdotes about Flannery O'Connor really illustrated this powerful drive to create despite the constraints of time and health.
Yes, her story is quite powerful. Flannery O'Connor's early awareness of her father's illness, which was lupus, the same disease she later developed.
I must have had a huge impact.
It seems it did. That awareness, coupled with her own later battle with lupus, instilled in her this fierce urgency and dedication to her writing. Despite facing significant physical challenges and knowing she likely had a shortened lifespan,
She remained deeply committed
to her work, driven by a profound sense of her calling as a writer. Her life is a powerful testament to how a strong sense of purpose can provide meaning and focus, even intense focus, in the face of life's inherent limitations and finiteness.
Her story is a powerful reminder of finding meaning in the face of our own mortality, not just despite it. Hey, finally, let's briefly discuss the importance of present moment awareness. It seems our minds are often anywhere but where we actually are.
That's a very common human experience, isn't it? Our minds frequently get caught in these loops, ruminating about the past, anxieties about the future. It significantly hinders our ability to fully engage with and appreciate the present moment, what's happening right now.
But sometimes things snap us back.
Yes. Encountering unfamiliar experiences, traveling somewhere new, or trying something completely different that can act as a powerful reset button. It sharpens our senses, pulls us back into the here and now because we have to pay
It's
attention.
like novelty forces us to be present. The discussion also touched on our modern tendency, especially in some cultures, to deny aging and death.
Yes, we live in a culture that often venerates youth and actively avoids acknowledging the realities of aging and mortality. We don't like to think about it, let alone talk about it.
And this has consequences.
This unconscious disconnection from the awareness of our own finite existence, the sources argue, can lead to a distorted perception of time, a tendency towards procrastination. I'll do it later, there's plenty of time.
Yeah.
And maybe a generalized underlying anxiety.
Because we subconsciously act as if we have limitless time.
Perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
It can make it difficult to fully commit to our goals, to appreciate the present, because there's always this vague sense of tomorrow.
It's almost as if by trying to ignore death, we're also diminishing the preciousness of life right now.
Precisely. And paradoxically, cultivating an awareness of the brevity of life can actually be a powerful catalyst for change, for living more fully.
How so?
When we consciously acknowledge our mortality, not morbidly, but realistically, we tend to develop a more focused relationship with time. We become less prone to procrastination, more intentional in how we live each day, what we prioritize.
So confronting our finiteness can make us more present and purposeful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful exploration of the often baffling, sometimes frustrating, but always fascinating world of human nature. It really has. And hopefully by gaining a deeper understanding of these fundamental principles, these underlying laws, you equip yourself with invaluable tools.
Tools for navigating both your own inner landscape, your thoughts, feelings, reactions, and the complex dynamics of your interactions with others.
Exactly. It truly moves us beyond just surface level observations, doesn't it? It helps us tap into the underlying motivations, the often invisible forces that shape our lives.
And this deeper awareness empowers you, hopefully, to navigate social situations with greater skill, make more informed decisions, and cultivate a richer sense of self-understanding, more clarity.
Absolutely.
So here's that final question to ponder, something to take away from this deep dive. How might a more profound understanding of these ingrained human tendencies reshape the way you approach your relationships, your goals, and perhaps even your own inner life moving forward? It's definitely something to keep reflecting on.